welcome to The Cynical Developer, explaining why you should bother with the latest and greatest in development technologies. In this episode we speak to Gavin Lanata, and apparently Xaml isn't dead. So Gavin is a freelance developer and designer, currently specialising in the Microsoft stack, .NET and .NET Core. After studying computer and art at college, he went on to study interactive entertainment at Sunderland University. Since then he's travelled the country building and supporting various projects in the industries including but not limited to gaming, manufacturing, steel stockholding, oil and gas and education. Gavin's also an author for Pluralsight and about to release his second course on ASP.NET Core middleware. He also writes for Code Guru and he writes articles on his own blog when he gets the time. In his spare time, he also likes a bit of photography, which has become something of a passion of his. So welcome to The Cynical Developer, Gavin.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So we're going to delve into Xaml and what that's all about and the fact that it is dead or it's not dead, and where do we go from there? So for our listeners, what is Xaml?
Well, Xaml is a declarative language for describing user interfaces on the Microsoft stack. It started with WPF, although there were appearance of it before WPF, but WPF is the one that most people will know about. And it's really just if you know HTML, it's as a declarative XML-based language, it allows you just to describe your object tree for your user interfaces, but doesn't actually contain any code for control flow or anything like that.
From what I know of Xaml, it's a bit like HTML, but it's where HTML really should be, and isn't. It's a lot more structured than that.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So you said it was around before WPF. What was it used for before WPF?
Do you remember Zune?
Yes, the little portable devices.
Player.
Yeah.
And the actual player for desktop.
Yes.
I can't remember when it first appeared. It was going back a long time now.
No.
But no, Zune actually used one of the first appearances of Xaml at the time. And back then it was actually only called Xaml. At the moment, when people ask what Xaml stands for, it comes an extensible application markup language.
Yeah.
But if you go to Tim, who was blog, who works on the Xaml framework, has done for a while at Microsoft, he actually describes that it never actually stood for anything. They just wanted a word that sounded different, but was XML-like, since it is an XML language.
All right, they just went for the cool sounding name, and then someone had to think up of what it meant later on.
Yeah, just put something because everybody was asking what it meant, so they just made it up.
Yeah. I used to like Zune. I used to use that as my main player on my computer, and I remember faking the color gradients and things they used to put on the album covers and stuff like that when you got it on the PC.
Yeah, I used to have it on full screen on one of my monitors. I've always been a multi-monitor guy.
Yeah.
One of the monitors with that full screen, and as you play the music, it would swap the album art, so it actually looked quite nice.
Yeah.
But also, it's the first one of the early chances you get to see the actual what we used to be called Metro UI for Windows 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Before that other design company came along and said you can't call it that because we've had something called Metro for years, but nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So apart from in Zune, where else is it used? Are there any other technologies that harness it at all?
Well, there was Silverlight, even though Silverlight is pretty much gone now. But it was created for creating rich interactive applications for the internet. Many saw it as an alternative to Flash. However, a lot of the core technology within Silverlight was different to how Flash works. But of course, Silverlight was adopted by a lot of big names. Now TV, a lot of people broadcasting video over the internet or streaming services use Silverlight a lot, and they still do now. But unfortunately, that's they're trying as quick as they can to switch over to HTML5 for that one.
Yeah, I think a lot of the benefits that it brought have been replaced by HTML5. I've in my past life I did produce an application, a kiosk application in Silverlight, but it just wasn't up to the job, and we had to port that to WPF very quickly after that.
Yeah, when I was in the gaming industry, did a WPF application for a kiosk. That's what we use that for.
Yeah.
just to expand a bit on what we were just saying, there's Silverlight, but then there was obviously went up to Silverlight 5 before it was declared finished. But there was also Silverlight 8, which was for Windows Phone 7. Did survive a little bit into Windows Phone 8, but then was killed off in favour of WinRT. And there's also the UWP applications.
Right. So XAML didn't die off with Silverlight as many thought. It's still powering WPF, and Windows Phone now doesn't support it either.
Yeah, it's Silverlight. The Silverlight framework for Windows Phone's gone, and now Microsoft are quite aggressively pushing everybody towards the Universal Windows platform instead.
Right. Okay. So you said that it was also used with UWP apps. Is it the same XAML that is used with WPF in the UWP stuff?
No, it's more closely. If a developer used Silverlight, you'd find it more closely resembles what Silverlight XAML was like, which is ultimately where it comes from anyway.
So if there's a difference between Silverlight, WPF, and UWP has now replaced the Silverlight type of XAML. What's the differences? What could I expect to get in WPF XAML that I'm not going to get in Silverlight, and maybe the other way around?
Well, WPF is probably the most dynamic of all of them because with it being desktop based, you can generally say that because it's on a desktop PC, it's going to have a lot more resources available to it than what a tablet might have. Therefore, there's our features of WPF for templating, where you can dynamically change a template just through the resource system. When it comes to animation, the animation system is very different as well. Where the UWP XAML or WinRT XAML, you would use the Visual State Manager. This feature is also available in WPF, but you also have triggers in WPF as well. But because they consume more resources, they were dropped for WinRT XAML. There's differences like that which you need to watch out for. So you can't just grab a page of WPF XAML and stick it into UWP, and chances are somebody will catch you out. That won't work.
Right. So you're talking about animations and things like that. Can you develop those straight in Visual Studio in the designer like you would have done with Windows Forms? You just drag and drop and there's something there, or do you need something extra to actually do your animation side of it?
You can do your animations directly in the XAML itself if you're used to seeing it or you know it well enough. But there is also an application called Blend. Now, Blend came in the Expression Studio right back from the early days of XAML. But since then, since Expression Studio was discontinued, Blend has actually survived. And when you use Blend, you actually have all the time controls available to you for storyboarding and the whatnot. And you can do your drag and drop, where you can actually record where you're dragging and drop items to. And it'll record and it'll create the XAML for you to animate it.
Right, so Blend is a standalone application outside of Visual Studio then?
Yeah, but most of the Visual Studios now actually have it as an option to download it with Visual Studio.
Right. So it's a bit of a similar experience to those out there that have looked at a bit of Objective-C in years gone by, and they had to jump in and out of Xcode and into the UI editor and back into the code editor and things like that. So you've got two editors to get your UI sorted then.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's the Visual Studio for simple animations. The Visual Studio design is actually quite capable and has a lot of the features that Blend does now. Like, say, if you want to do something really heavy with a lot of animation, I'd recommend Blend.
Right. So it's not used in Windows Phone development anymore, but does Xamarin use something similar to it? Is it XAML, do you know, that Xamarin uses, or is that its own sort of take on the technology?
It is XAML-like. So I was going to bring this one up there before. It is XAML-like, and if you're used to working with the XAML, you'll find it a lot easier to get into Xamarin, what is called Xamarin Forms, rather than XAML itself. But it isn't based on the Microsoft XAML. Certain namings within the framework, you'll find that are different. There are also a lot of features that Xamarin Forms doesn't have that XAML does have. But at the same time, so you can use Xamarin. You don't have to use Xamarin Forms if you're going cross-platform, but it is an option there. But it especially excels in data manipulation applications, which is quite common in enterprise.
Yeah, I guess it gives you, we've talked about before, it gives you those nice animations, so you can make your nice graphs that pop in and out and things like that on
Yeah.
your screen. Whereas back in the Winform days, it's they were always very static in flat colours, or you had to pay a lot of money and get a very expensive plugin that still didn't quite make the grade.
Yes, yes. I mean, especially with Xaml as well, because there's quite a few variants of the framework. You've got companies out there producing controls for you as well if you want to put in a quick, very pretty graph.
Right.
Like it's like the JavaScript community. There's loads out there for graphs and whatnot. The XAML community is not that dissimilar. Not nowhere near as big, of course, but it's not that dissimilar.
Sure. So does it have a lot of open source and that sort of following, or is it a lot of paid add-ons and libraries?
There's certainly plenty of paid libraries out there, but there are certainly pockets of open source contributions as well.
Sure. So developing a XAML application, whether it's through WPF or UWP, how does that compare to what some of us are more used to, which would be Winforms? Because we're used to just dragging and dropping a couple of buttons, a couple of forms, controllers onto a Windows form, and away we go. Is it that simple, or do you need a bit of a design capability in your skill set, or not?
It can be that simple, yes. You can drag and drop if you want to do that. It does have an inbuilt system to mimic what you can get in Winforms using an element called the canvas. Because in Winforms you can place your controls by coordinates, can't you?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
If you put a canvas as your layout route on the WPF application, you can do exactly the same. And it will give you all that.
Okay.
Oh.
So Windows Forms was always very static. And if you put it onto a machine that its resolution wasn't high enough, which often was the case many years ago when we were doing a lot of Windows Forms stuff, what happens with these XAML forms? Are they responsive? Are they able to fit to the screen, or do developers still face the same problems with those?
No, WPF has what it's known as the independent pixel system. And funny enough, I've just actually completed a project using that very system for various reasons. I mean, we're not talking about larger monitors. We're talking about the application running on monitors with different DPIs,
right,
which is quite common now.
Okay.
We're talking about really big screens like interactive boards, which, of course, when you run Windows on that, even right down from Windows 7, what Windows does, it would scale up just to make the icons look bigger. And WPF, because there's independent pixel system, I'll give you an example of what you would do. So you have a text box and you say, I want this text box to be 400 pixels wide. And you would put that into its width property.
Okay.
However, the system behind that, it'll take that. Then there's another property on every control, which you got is called actual width. And you say, I want this to be for 400, 800. It'll go through the system, then it'll do all the calculations to create that text box to the size it would be on a different monitor with DPI, or different size monitor with different scale and settings. So it's like the same. So you expect to see it at the same size, and it'll give you a value back on the actual width of that's the computed value.
Oh, right, okay.
So it does have all that system behind it.
So that works for scaling up. Does that also work with scaling down as well?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay. That's very useful. That's not something I was aware of at all with those applications.
There's some. The only thing the caution is that there's some monitors now, especially with Windows 10, where there are slight problems. But I have heard that the next version of WPF will be correcting that. Is
that down to maybe the ratios? Because I've seen some very odd ratio monitors out in the market lately.
Most of that's what I believe it is. Yeah, I mean, we saw a monitor on the project I was just on, and the values we were getting back, it just didn't make sense at all. It just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
So that was one particular monitor that was off the list.
Yeah, I've just invested in some new monitors myself, and I've got some Samsung Curve monitors. And when I was looking at them, I think there was a Panasonic, and it claimed to be the same resolution and the same size monitor, but it looked to be about 4 foot long. and very, very thin. It just had a very, very odd aspect ratio.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that.
Before we started recording, we were talking briefly about the community document from Telerik. And
Yes.
what I'll do, I'll include a link in the show notes to this, the community report for .NET, and it's quite eye-opening for some people, especially for myself. It was WPF versus Windows Forms, and I thought a lot of people would be using WPF now over Windows Forms, but it's almost equal. WPF 46% and Windows Forms 42%.
42, yeah.
And
it was actually that particular line that actually that bring this document out, actually. But yeah, carry on. I'll talk about it in a moment.
yeah, and then you've got a very small number with UWP, which we'll be talking about in an upcoming episode. Electron, console applications and other applications are down in the 1% and 2%. So there's not many people working on those at the moment. But even against people working on web applications, it's still very high. And I guess that sort of speaks for the industry of, or a lot of these companies are out there. They've invested the money, I guess, in these technologies, so they've got to stick with them for now, and they can't all afford to move to the shiny new internet based version.
Yeah. There's other sides to that as well. I mean, like I said, that particular line I was going to pick out. I mean, when I was in the steel industry, we were working on systems which were actually built for Windows 3.1, and they were still largely in use up to about 5 years ago.
Right.
I mean, these things were built directly on top of the Windows API using C++, which of course means that they still work now on Windows. Even on Windows 10, they'll still work. Because there's a guy sat in Microsoft and his whole life is dedicated to ensuring backwards compatibility with certain areas of the Windows API.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when we came on, we looked at Windows Forms, especially at the time. I mean, going back, it's pre-2010. I mean, WPF was pretty young at the time. So, of course, for us, as Windows Forms would be in the direct upgrade from this Win32 application. But the other side of that, though, is they didn't want to move to, within the steel industry, they didn't want to move to the internet immediately because these people are very highly competitive. I mean, their data is their data. They don't want it anywhere else or the chance of it ever being anywhere else. I mean, they're still using servers in their on-premises servers. So, yeah, but they wanted to make it look prettier than it was. Now, a lot of my work is against one of the options where I would go for WPF over Winforms is that when I go for a job as a freelancer, they'll put a design package for me together to look over. And to do that in Windows Forms, you're talking many months of work if it can be done. Nearly over a year if you go on Win32, but WPF, because of Xaml, it brings along a lot of clout when it comes to applying a design to it.
Yeah, I guess you can make it look pretty. You can do a lot of anti-alias and a lot of gradients, and you drop shadows and your animations and things like that you just can't do in Windows Form very easily. I do remember sort of when .NET first came out, trying to make odd-shaped forms and the hoops and things you had to jump through to get that to happen. Whereas with WPF, I guess you can make your form any shape and size and colour that you want to.
And because of the responsive layout, it makes it a lot bigger when you resize your screen or different monitors like we've talked about.
Yeah.
But again, I do a lot of WPF work as well because the companies that I work with or the people I work for don't want their stuff to be out there on the internet. It's very much for various legal reasons or other reasons, especially in manufacturing, it needs to be internal.
Right. Yeah. So they're keeping it on their big, huge mainframes that are stored in large rooms on their premises to protect that data.
Or their PCs simply don't have internet access. They might have some simple local network access, but no internet.
Yeah, and I could see a lot of problems if you were to move that to a web application. But even having that web application held internally, if you were connecting to any content delivery networks or anything like that, then your program's just not going to work. So it makes it a lot harder, I guess.
Yeah. But especially with the legal side of things as well, depending on who it is you work for, there could be potential consequences for data ever leaving the system.
Yeah. So based on this report, and I guess from what you say, what you're saying is that you work on this day to day for companies, that XAML, WPF are around for a lot longer, and even now, Winforms has probably still got a lot of legs left in it, and it is going to be one of those technologies that is worth learning.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Winforms, I find it very predominantly survives in areas, especially in small to medium enterprises, where they just want a very good application for data manipulation, and Winforms gives you that very easily.
Sure. Yeah, because my background is mainly web development. I've done a little bit of Windows development and things in the past. But I think even my WPF applications, I build them as if I was building a Winforms app, which I'm told by many people that's not the right way to do it, because you should be looking at the MVVM model, very similar to how you build an MVC app, and then you use all the bindings and stuff like that that's available.
But yeah, that's one of the biggest features of XAML is the binding engine. Then after that, I would put the layout engine and whatnot behind that.
Right. Okay. So what do you see as the future of XAML? What do you think the big next things are?
At the moment, I think it's pretty strong where it is. I mean, outside of the world of where it lives, it can seem that it is like it's disappearing and it's dead, like we've mentioned. Yeah. But within it's one of those things. The market balances itself out. Technology becomes popular where it's needed most, and at the moment, I can see it staying where it is.
Right.
I mean, if you got, of course, you got the XAML like on Xamarin, the Xamarin Forms, if you want to go cross-platform.
Yeah.
But other than that, XAML's very strong on the Microsoft stack, really, more than anything else.
Sure. On that same sort of line, I guess, we mentioned cross-platform there with Xamarin. Does .NET Core have a flavour of XAML? Is it full XAML if it does have anything like that?
UWP is .NET Core. Right. I mean, UWP is built directly on .NET Core. It's actually where .NET Core really came from.
Okay.
I mean, it's become more popular, especially with ASP.NET Core and other things appearing on top of it. But yeah, it's UWP. If you go into .NET Core, UWP is your answer if you don't have WPF.
Sure. And as we already mentioned, you can't just take what you've got in your WPF app and drop it in UWP and expect it to work 100%.
If it's basic XAML, yes, but yeah, there's certain features in there that will most definitely catch you out. But there's other features as well that it's worth going to UWP for, especially now within WPF applications and Winforms where you got the UI thread.
Yeah.
But controlling the UI thread or overloading it is fairly easy thing to do, especially in WPF, because one of the problems with WPF, if you misconstruct your XAML, you can put far more work onto that UI thread than really what you need. UWP or WinRT XAML does actually offer a slight relief from that there's actually two threads, and one of them's the compositor, which is purely dedicated to animation. So you can do your animations on that thread and leave your UI thread free for other work.
Right. So you try and do something fancy, and you're not blocking the rest of the application.
Yeah, the animations are actually put onto the compositor thread by default.
Okay.
But animations which directly manipulate an object, it's more to do with purely anything that can be rendered or projected onto the screen and rendered differently from how it really should appear, that we done on the compositor. But if you're going to directly change an object, then you can't do that, obviously, because it's marshaled for the UI thread.
Sure. So if I wanted to go and learn XAML or find out a little bit more about it and start building, do you have any suggestions about where I could go to actually learn about XAML?
I would just especially go on a code project. There's plenty of little projects around that you might want to learn from. Microsoft itself, because Microsoft has actually been pushing the technology for quite a while. And maybe they push it too much more towards the designers at some point, but they have actually put together some nice little projects they can go into their resources for and actually learn quite a bit. Channel 9, I would strongly recommend. There's been quite a lot over the years on Channel 9. That is definitely worth looking at.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We'll get some links in the show notes for those as well. So, XAML's not dead. It's not going anywhere. It's definitely something that we should be looking at. I think, even as a web developer, I think you need a little bit of skill in Windows development. And if you're doing MVC, it's not a million miles away from what you're doing day to day. So it's definitely worth a look then. And I'll have to stop giving the guys that I work with a hard time for being WPF gurus and telling them what are they doing, because it's definitely not going away for a long time just yet.
Not just yet, no, but say it's the opposite for me. I have to dive into web development even there.
Yeah. So where I'm shouting and screaming at WPF and saying why aren't you doing it, you're shouting and screaming at JavaScript and saying why aren't you doing it?
I mean, look, the desktop's got loads of resources. Get it to do some work.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's going to conclude today's episode. I think it's covered quite at a high level what XAML is, what it covers, what it brings to the table, and the fact that it isn't dead, as I maybe thought, and as some of you listeners out there may think. If you've got any questions on XAML, let me know. I can pass them on to Gavin. You can even ask him himself via his Twitter account. And there'll be some more contact details for him in the show notes, as well as links to his Pluralsight courses. So until next time, thanks for listening, and thanks Gavin for being on.
No, thank you for having me. That was good fun.
Thanks very much. The show notes and any resource links for this episode can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com.